The cold arrived without mercy. Minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of cold that found the cracks in a man's resolve and pressed until something broke. North Pine, Montana had seen worse winters, but January 2026 came down hard and stayed that way, turning the air into something sharp enough to cut. The town square at 5:30 in the evening looked like a painting left out in the frost. Street lights flickered on early, casting yellow pools across packed snow that squeaked underfoot. Storefronts glowed warm behind fogged windows. People moved quickly, heads down, breath steaming white. No one lingered. No one looked around. Winter taught you to keep moving or pay the price. Walter Briggs stood at the edge of the square, where the light didn't quite reach. He was 68 years old and looked every day of it. His coat was brown, patched at the elbows with fabric that didn't match, and his jeans had faded to the color of old denim washed too many times. The knit cap pulled low over his silver hair was frayed at the edges. His hands, bare because he'd lost his gloves somewhere in the last 2 months, were red and raw from the cold. He held a piece of cardboard torn from a box he'd found behind the grocery store. The letters were uneven, written with a Sharpie that was running dry. $5, mother dog and puppies. Need good person. At his feet sat a German shepherd. She was black and tan, her coat thick but not thick enough for this kind of weather. Her eyes were amber, the color of whiskey held up to light, and they watched the square with a calm that felt almost human. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She didn't perform desperation the way some animals did when they sensed trouble. Her body angled protectively around 2 small shapes pressed close to her belly. The puppies were 4 months old, still clumsy with their own legs. One was brighter in color, russet and cream, with ears too big for his head. He shifted restlessly, making small, indignant sounds every time someone walked past without stopping. The other was darker charcoal and black, her eyes already holding the same serious focus as her mother. She stayed still, nose tucked under the shepherd's chest, as if listening for something beneath the noise of the street. People passed. A woman in a puffer jacket glanced over, then away. A man with grocery bags shook his head and kept walking. A teenager slowed, pulled out his phone like he might take a picture, then thought better of it and moved on. Walter didn't call out. He didn't beg. He just stood there holding the sign, waiting for someone who would see what he was offering. Not charity, a responsibility. The cold pressed in. His chest ached with each breath. He'd been standing there for 2 hours and the light was fading fast. Soon it would be full dark and the temperature would drop another 5 degrees. He'd have to make a choice. The shelter downtown didn't allow animals. The warming station on 4th Street was already over capacity. He could try the old church basement, but Father Macklin had been clear last time. No dogs. Walter looked down at Mercy. She looked back, patient and steady. The puppies stirred against her warmth. He was about to pick up the sign and leave when a pickup truck pulled into the square and stopped 20 feet away. The truck was a Ford F-150, maybe 15 years old, with rust blooming along the wheel wells and a dent in the rear bumper that looked like it had been there long enough to become permanent. The engine idled rough for a moment, then cut off. The driver's side door opened. The man who stepped out was tall, just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a canvas work jacket. He wore jeans and tan work boots that had seen better days. His hair was dark brown, cut short in a style that suggested military habit more than fashion. His face was clean-shaven, angular, with a strong jaw and deep-set eyes that were somewhere between blue and gray. There was a stillness to him, the kind that came from discipline or exhaustion or both. He stood by the truck for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking at Walter. Then his gaze dropped to the dog. His posture tightened. His focus sharpened. He crossed the square, slowly, boots crunching on the snow, and stopped 6 feet away. Close enough to talk, far enough to give space. Mercy lifted her head. Her ears came forward, but she didn't rise. She didn't growl. She simply looked at him, assessing. The man looked back. His eyes moved over her in a way that wasn't casual. He was reading her. The way she held her weight, the slight forward lean of her shoulders, the discipline in how she stayed positioned between the puppies and any potential threat. "She's trained," he said. His voice was low, steady, economical. Walter nodded. "She is. Military service dog. PTSD program." The man's jaw tightened. He looked at Walter, then back at Mercy. "You're not selling her." "No. The sign says $5. Walter's grip on the cardboard shifted. "The sign's wrong. I'm not selling. I'm finding someone who will understand what she is." The man was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, rattling the bare branches of the trees that lined the square. Somewhere a car horn honked. A door slammed. "What's her name?" the man asked. "Mercy." The man crouched down slowly, knees bending, hands resting on his thighs. He didn't reach out. He didn't make sudden movements. He just waited. Mercy watched him. 10 seconds passed. 15. Then she took one step forward, closing half the distance between them. She stopped head level with his and held his gaze. The man's breathing slowed. His eyes didn't leave hers. For just a moment, pain flickered across his face. Memory. It was there and gone fast as a shadow. He stood up slowly, looked at Walter. One night, warm place. You can decide after that. Walter stared at him. I don't need charity. I'm not offering it. I'm offering shelter for one night. Then you make your choice. Why? The man's gaze returned to Mercy. His voice went quieter. Because I know what she is, and I know what it kisses when no one helps. Walter's hands shook, not from cold, from something that felt like relief and fear mixed together in equal measure. He looked down at the puppies, then at Mercy, then back at the man. Just one night. Just one. Walter nodded once. Okay. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his truck keys. I'm Garrett. Garrett Hale. Walter Briggs. He paused. The puppies too. All of you. They loaded into the truck in silence. Mercy climbed into the back seat with practiced ease, the puppies scrambling after her. Walter sat in front of the cardboard sign folded on his lap. Garrett started the engine and pulled out of the square. No one spoke. The heater rattled to life, blowing cold air that slowly turned warm. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of tires on frozen road and the occasional whimper from the brighter puppy who couldn't seem to settle. Garrett drove north away from downtown toward the edge of town where the houses thinned out and the land opened up. The road curved along the shoreline of Lake North Pine, a vast stretch of water, now frozen into a pale sheet of ice that reflected the last light of the day. After 10 minutes, Garrett turned onto a gravel drive that led to a small cabin set back from the road. It was modest single-story with a stone chimney and a covered porch. The siding was weathered but intact. A single light burned in the front window. Garrett parked and cut the engine. He sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, looking at the cabin like he was deciding something. Then he opened the door. Come on. Inside the cabin was warm, sparse but warm. The front room held a couch and armchair, a coffee table with nothing on it. The walls were bare except for a single photograph tacked to the side of the refrigerator in the kitchen beyond. The photo showed a group of men in desert camouflage, standing in front of a helicopter squinting into the sun. Garrett hung his jacket on a hook by the door. You can sit there. He nodded toward the couch. I'll get some food together. Walter lowered himself onto the couch slowly, like his bones hurt. Mercy stepped into the room, her eyes moving over every corner, every shadow. She didn't relax. She took up position near the couch, close enough to Walter to protect far enough to see the whole room. The puppies tumbled after her. The russet one, bold and curious, immediately tried to explore, sniffing the leg of the coffee table and then the base of the armchair. The darker one stayed close to Mercy, pressing against her side. Garrett moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. He filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove. He pulled out a loaf of bread, some cheese, a can of soup. The motions were practiced, automatic. He didn't look at Walter. He didn't make small talk. He just worked. 10 minutes later, he brought 2 bowls of soup and 2 mugs of tea to the coffee table. He set one of each in front of Walter, then took the other and leaned against the kitchen counter. Walter wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his frozen fingers. He didn't drink right away. He just held it, staring down into the steam. I had a house, he said quietly. Not much, but it was mine. Garrett waited without speaking. Walter took a breath. I worked with a program, Warriors and Paws. We trained service dogs for veterans. PTSD mostly. Mobility issues, some. The founder was a man named Evan Cross. Good man. He cared. He paused, his hands tightening around the mug. Evan died 14 months ago, November 2024. Heart attack. He was only 52. Garrett's expression remained neutral, but his shoulders tensed slightly. I got sick after that, Walter continued. Pneumonia, bad. I was in the hospital for a week. When I got out, my neighbor helped me with the paperwork. Medical bills, insurance forms. His name was Victor Drummond. He seemed kind, said he'd take care of it. Walter's voice went flat. 2 months later, I got a notice. My house had been transferred. Victor owned it. I owed $15,000 in medical liens I didn't even know about. He gave me 30 days to leave. Garrett set his mug down. You signed something. I don't remember. I was feverish. He came to the hospital with papers, said it was an assistance form. Temporary. Walter looked up, his eyes red. I trusted him. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to a desk in the corner and opened a laptop. The screen glowed to life. He typed for a minute, then another. Victor Drummond, he said, developer. Lawyer. He runs a firm called Drummond and Associates. Walter nodded. That's him. Garrett clicked through a few more pages. His jaw tightened. There's an article here from last August. Financial irregularities at Warriors and Paws. Victor Drummond was accused of misappropriating donation funds. Charges were dropped. Walter closed his eyes. Evan tried to stop him. He was going to report Victor to the state attorney general. Then he died. The room went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the heater and the soft rustle of the puppies settling against Mercy's side. Garrett closed the laptop. He studied Walter's face. I'm not a lawyer. I can't promise I can fix this. I'm not asking you to fix it, Walter said. I just needed one night. Warm, safe. He glanced at Mercy. For them. Garrett stayed silent. He stood by the desk, hands resting on the back of the chair, staring at nothing. Then Mercy stood. She walked across the room, not to Walter, but to Garrett. She stopped in front of him, sat down, and looked up. Garrett looked down at her. Something passed between them. Something that didn't need words. He reached out slowly and rested his hand on her head. She leaned into it just slightly. Okay, Garrett said quietly. One night. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. One night was already too many. One night meant he'd seen them. And once you saw someone really saw them, you couldn't unsee it. The night stretched long. Walter fell asleep on the couch, his breathing shallow and uneven. Mercy stayed awake, her eyes half closed, but alert. The puppies curled together in a tight ball, their small bodies rising and falling in rhythm. Garrett sat in the armchair by the window, staring out at the frozen lake. The moon was up now, casting silver light across the ice. The world outside looked still and silent and cold. He didn't sleep. He hadn't slept well in years. At 2 in the morning, the nightmare came. It always started the same way. The convoy, the road, the smell of dust and diesel, the radio chatter low and constant voices overlapping. Then the explosion, the flash of light, the sound that wasn't really a sound, just a wall of pressure that knocked the air out of his lungs. He woke with his heart pounding, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cold. His breath came fast and shallow. His hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard his knuckles went white. He forced his eyes open. The room swam. He tried to count. 1, 2, 3. The numbers didn't help. His chest was tight. Too tight. He couldn't breathe right. Couldn't slow down. Then there was weight. Warm, solid weight pressing against his chest. He looked down. Mercy. She had crossed the room without sound and now stood with her front paws on his lap. Her chest pressed against his, her amber eyes locked on his face. She didn't whine. She didn't paw at him. She remained motionless, steady and present, her breathing slow and even. Garrett's breath hitched. He tried to match her rhythm. In, out, in, out. His heart rate began to slow. The tightness in his chest eased by degrees. Mercy stayed exactly where she was, her weight grounding him, her warmth real and solid and here. After a long moment, Garrett lifted one hand and rested it on her back. She leaned into him just a little. Across the room, Walter stirred but didn't wake. The puppies didn't move. Garrett let his eyelids drop. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. How did you know? Mercy didn't answer. She just stayed. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, Garrett hadn't slept. But he hadn't panicked again either. Mercy returned to her place by the couch as the light grew stronger. Garrett stood, stretched his stiff shoulders, and walked to the kitchen. He made coffee. He scrambled eggs. He set the table. Walter woke slowly, blinking in the pale light. He looked around, momentarily confused, then remembered. He sat up carefully, his chest rattling with a cough. Garrett brought him a plate. Eat. Walter did. They ate in silence. The puppies woke and tumbled over each other, clumsy and noisy. Mercy watched them with the patience of a mother who had done this before. Walter smiled faintly as the brighter puppy tried to climb over the darker one and failed spectacularly. The bold one. Evan always said he'd make a good ranger someday. Fearless, always charging forward. He watched the darker puppy, who sat quietly observing her brother's antics. And that one, she's a scout, always watching, always learning, smart. Garrett nodded, the names fit. When they finished, Garrett set his plate aside and turned to Walter. I'm taking you into town. We're going to the county clerk's office. Walter blinked. Why, fine? Because I want to see the paperwork, the deed transfer, the notary, the dates. You said you're not a lawyer. I'm not, but I know how to read, and I know when something doesn't add up. Walter's hands shook. Victor has connections. He'll know. Let him know. They drove into town under a sky the color of old steel. The roads were clear, but the air was still brutal, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache. Garrett parked at the county courthouse, a squat brick building with narrow windows and a flagpole out front. Inside, the air was warm and stale. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A clerk sat behind a desk, typing slowly on a computer that looked like it was older than she was. Garrett walked up to the counter. I need to see property records. Transfer deed for 47 Lakeview Road. The clerk didn't look up. Name, Walter Briggs. She typed, waited, typed again. Then she pulled up a file and turned the monitor so they could see. There it was, the deed transfer, dated March 15, 2020, signed by Walter Briggs, notarized by Barbara Mills. Garrett leaned closer. He studied the signature. Then his gaze found Walter. Do you have your driver's license? Walter fumbled in his coat and pulled out a battered wallet. He handed over the license. Garrett held it next to the screen. The signatures didn't match, not even close. The clerk noticed. Her eyes flicked between the two and something in her expression shifted. That's unusual. Who's Barbara Mills? Garrett asked. The clerk typed again. Her frown deepened. Retired notary, moved to Arizona last February. She paused. She filed a report in February 2025. Said her notary stamp was stolen. Walter's breath caught. She wasn't even here in March. The clerk looked uncomfortable. I can't comment on that. You'd need to take it up with... The door behind them opened. A woman in a sheriff's deputy uniform walked in, stomping snow off her boots. She was in her early 30s, compact and athletic, with dark brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Her face was weathered from wind and sun, and her eyes, a deep brown, moved over the room with the kind of sharp attention that missed nothing. She stopped when she saw Garrett. You're new. Passing through, Garrett said. Her attention shifted to Walter. Recognition flickered. Walter Briggs, I remember you. You worked with Warriors and Paws. Walter nodded. I did. Her gaze went to the computer screen, then back to Garrett. What are you looking at? Garrett stepped aside so she could see. She read for a moment. Her jaw tightened. Kira Thornton, she said, extending a hand. Deputy Flathead County. Garrett shook it. Garrett Hale. She looked at the screen again. This the Victor Drummond property. You know about it. I know about 3 others just like it. Same pattern, same notary. She glanced at the clerk. Can I get a copy of this? The clerk hesitated, then printed 2 copies. Kira took them and folded them into her jacket. Come with me, she said. They walked outside. The cold hit like a fist. Kira led them around the side of the building away from the main entrance. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Yeah, it's me. I need you to pull the file on Barbara Mills, the notary theft report from February. She listened. I don't care if it's closed. Open it again. She hung up. Her attention returned to Garrett. Victor Drummond's been doing this for years, targeting elderly veterans, people who donated to Warriors and Paws, people who volunteered. He gets them when they're vulnerable, sick, confused. He has them sign documents they don't understand. Then he forecloses. How many? Garrett asked. That I know of 4, but I think it's more. She paused. The problem is proving it. He's got connections, lawyers, a judge in his pocket. Walter's face went pale. Judge Brennan. Kira nodded. His son-in-law works for Drummond's firm. Every case that's gone to Brennan's court gets dismissed. Garrett's hands curled into fists. What about state federal? Elder fraud's federal jurisdiction. But we need hard evidence. More than forged signatures. We need financial records. Communications. Something that ties him directly to a pattern. I might have that, Walter said quietly. They both turned to him. Walter's voice was shaking. Before Evan died, he gave me something. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe. I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was being paranoid. What did he give you? Kira asked. A pouch, small, waterproof. He told me to keep it with Mercy. I put it in her collar. There's a hidden compartment. I haven't opened it. Garrett's breath came faster. Where's Mercy? In the truck. They ran. The truck was where they'd left it, parked at the edge of the lot. Mercy sat in the back seat, calm and patient. Garrett opened the door. Hey girl, easy. He reached for her collar. His fingers found the seam. The leather was thick, doubled over, stitched tight. But there was a small metal zipper, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. He pulled it open. Inside was a small pouch wrapped in plastic. He pulled it out and unzipped it. Inside was a micro SD card. Kira took it carefully. We need a computer. They went to the library 3 blocks away. Kira used a public terminal, sliding the card into an adapter. The screen loaded. Files appeared, dozens of them. Financial records, emails, an audio file. Kira opened the audio file first. Evan Cross's voice filled the small cubicle tinny through the cheap speakers. Victor, I'm not signing anything. What you're asking me to do is fraud. You're targeting vulnerable veterans, people who trusted us. Another voice, smooth, calm. Evan, you're being old-fashioned. This is business. Opportunities close quickly. It's exploitation. Call it what you want. Sign the transfer authorization for the property rights, or I'll make sure your heart condition acts up. A pause. Then Evan's voice tight with fear. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you options. Think carefully. The recording ended. Kira sat back, her face pale. That's a threat. That's a recorded threat. Garrett stared at the screen. When did Evan die? Walter's voice was barely a whisper. November 12th, twim. Kira clicked through the files. She found a spreadsheet. Property acquisitions, names, dates, amounts, 9 properties, all acquired between 2019 and 2025, all from elderly veterans connected to Warriors and Paws. Total value $6.2 million. Total paid to victims averaged $30,000 each. Kira pulled out her phone again. She didn't ask permission. She copied the files to a secure cloud drive, then composed an email. Who are you sending that to? Garrett asked. FBI, White Collar Crime Unit, Montana Field Office. She paused. I know someone there, Agent Rebecca Stanton. She specializes in elder financial exploitation. She hit send. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Kira stood. Go back to your place. Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. I'll reach out when I hear something. Garrett and Walter walked back to the truck. Mercy watched them approach, her amber eyes calm. They drove home without speaking. The sky had darkened again, clouds moving in. The weather report that morning had called for another storm. Back at the cabin, Garrett made soup. Walter sat at the table staring at nothing. Ranger and Scout played on the floor, oblivious. Mercy lay near the door, her head on her paws. But her eyes stayed open, watching. It was just after 8 when the headlights appeared in the driveway. 3 vehicles, SUVs, black. They parked in a line, engines running. Garrett moved to the window. His stomach dropped. Walter, get away from the windows. What? Now. Walter scrambled up. Garrett grabbed his hunting rifle from the closet. He checked the magazine. 5 rounds. The SUVs cut their engines. Doors open. Men stepped out. 6 of them, 2 wearing sheriff's uniforms, 4 in civilian clothes, all armed. Mercy rose. She moved to stand between the door and Walter. A low growl rumbled in her chest. It was the first sound she'd made all day. Garrett's hands were steady. His breathing was slow. Different place, different enemy, same training. One of the uniformed men approached the porch. He stopped at the bottom step. Garrett Hale, you're harboring a fugitive. Walter Briggs has an outstanding warrant for fraud. Send him out. Garrett's voice was calm. Show me the warrant. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I don't need to show you anything. He took a step up. Garrett raised the rifle. Yes, you do. The man stopped. Behind him, the others shifted. Hands moved toward holsters. Mercy's growl deepened. Everything hung in the balance for one long, terrible second. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet punched through the front window and buried itself in the wall behind Garrett's head. Glass exploded inward, 1,000 tiny fragments catching the light as they fell. The sound was sharp and final, cutting through the winter night like a blade. Garrett dropped to the floor, dragging Walter down with him. The old man hit the ground hard, the air rushing out of his lungs in a wheeze. Mercy didn't flinch. She moved in front of them, both body low, teeth bared for the first time since Garrett had met her. Ranger yelped and scrambled toward his mother. Scout pressed herself flat against the floor, eyes wide but silent. Outside, boots hit the porch steps. Heavy, multiple sets. Garrett rolled to his knees, bringing the rifle up. His training kicked in like muscle memory, smooth and automatic. Assess, prioritize, execute. The front door was solid wood, but it wouldn't hold long. The windows were compromised. The back door led to open ground with no cover for 60 yards. They were trapped. Stay down, he said to Walter. His voice was steady, almost calm. Combat calm. Another shot. This one hit the door frame, splintering wood. Then a voice loud and authoritative. Come out now and nobody else gets hurt. Garrett recognized the voice. The deputy in uniform. The one who'd approached first. He didn't answer. Words were wasted breath right now. He moved to the side window, staying low and risked a glance. 6 men, 2 still by the vehicle's rifles raised. 4 advancing on the cabin in a loose formation. Not military trained, but competent enough. The 2 in uniform were in front. The lead deputy was young, maybe 30, with a clean-shaven face and the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly afraid. His nameplate read Foster. Garrett pulled back from the window. His mind moved through options like flipping through cards. Fight from inside meant being pinned down until they breached or burned them out. Running meant exposing Walter to open fire. The old man was already struggling to breathe, his face pale in the dim light. Then Mercy moved. She crossed to the back door in 3 quick strides, stopped and looked back at Garrett, not asking permission, telling him. She knew something he didn't. Garrett made the decision in half a second. "Walter, can you move fast?" The old man nodded, clutching his chest. "When I say go, you grab those puppies and you run out the back door. Stay low. Head for the tree line. Don't stop. Don't look back." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." It was a lie. They both knew, did. But there wasn't time for truth. Garrett moved to the front door, rifle ready. He counted down in his head. 3, 2. He yanked the door open and fired twice into the ground 5 feet in front of Deputy Foster. Snow and dirt kicked up. Foster dove sideways, shouting. The men behind him scattered. "Go!" Garrett yelled. Walter scrambled to his feet, scooped up both puppies in his arms, and stumbled toward the back door. Mercy was already through it, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Garrett fired once more, keeping Foster pinned, then turned and ran. He hit the back door 3 seconds after Walter. The night outside was black and freezing, the temperature having dropped another 5 degrees. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. Snow had started to fall, light but steady. Walter was 20 feet ahead, moving in an awkward, limping run, the puppies squirming in his arms. Mercy circled back, herding him forward. Gunfire erupted behind them. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets hissed through the air, thudding into snow and tree trunks. Garrett didn't return fire. He ran. The tree line was 50 yards. 40. 30. A bullet cracked past Garrett's ear, so close he felt the displacement of air. He zigzagged, combat instinct overriding thought. 20 yards. 10. They hit the trees and the darkness swallowed them whole. Garrett grabbed Walter's arm and pulled him deeper into the forest. The old man was gasping now, each breath a rattling wheeze. The puppies whimpered, but didn't struggle. Behind them, voices shouted. Flashlight beams cut through the trees, sweeping back and forth. Mercy stopped and looked back. Her ears were forward, her body tense. Then she turned and pushed ahead, choosing the path. Garrett followed her. He had no better options. They moved through the forest in near silence, the only sounds their labored breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot. The trees were dense here, mostly pine and fir, their branches heavy with snow. The ground was uneven roots and rocks hidden beneath a white blanket that made every step treacherous. Walter stumbled. Garrett caught him before he fell. "Keep moving." "I can't." "You can." They pushed on. The voices behind them faded, then surged closer again. The men were spreading out, trying to flank them. Smart. Coordinated. After 5 minutes, Garrett stopped. Walter collapsed against a tree, his chest heaving. He set the puppies down. They immediately pressed against Mercy, shivering. Garrett listened. The forest was never truly silent. Wind in the branches, the creak of wood, the soft whisper of falling snow. But underneath it all, he heard them. Boots on snow, 3 sets, maybe 4, coming from the east. His gaze found Walter. The old man's lips were blue. His hands shook uncontrollably. Hypothermia was setting in. They'd been outside less than 10 minutes and already the cold was winning. "We can't stop," Garrett said. Walter didn't respond. His eyes were glazed. Garrett knelt down and grabbed his shoulders. "Walter, look at me." The old man blinked, focused. "We have to keep moving. If we stop, we die. Do you understand?" Walter nodded weakly. Garrett pulled him to his feet. Mercy picked up Ranger by the scruff of his neck, gentle but firm. Scout followed on her own, staying close. They moved again. West, now away from the voices. The terrain sloped downward, getting steeper. Garrett's boots slipped on ice hidden beneath the snow. He grabbed a tree branch to steady himself, kept moving. After another 10 minutes, the ground leveled out. They were in a small clearing, maybe 30 feet across. A creek ran through it, frozen solid, the ice dark and thick. Garrett stopped. He looked around, getting his bearings. They were about a mile from the cabin, maybe a little more. The voices behind them had faded again, but he knew they were still coming. Walter sank to his knees. I can't. Garrett didn't argue. He knelt beside him and started assessing. Walter's heartbeat fluttered irregularly under Garrett's fingers. His skin felt like wet ice. His breathing was shallow, each inhale accompanied by a wet rattle that Garrett recognized from too many medevacs, pneumonia, and now exposure was making it worse. Walter, when's the last time you took your antibiotics? 3 days ago, ran out. Garrett swore under his breath. Okay, we're going to rest here, just for a few minutes. Walter's eyes closed. Just let me sleep. No, stay awake. Garrett shook him gently. Look at me. Stay awake. Mercy moved closer. She lay down next to Walter, pressing her body against his side. The puppies huddled on his other side, adding their small warmth. It wasn't enough. Garrett pulled off his jacket and draped it over Walter. The cold hit him immediately, sharp and brutal. He was wearing only a thermal shirt now, and the wind cut through it like it wasn't there. His attention went to Mercy. She was watching him with those amber eyes, calm and focused. We need help, he said quietly. She tilted her head slightly. Then she stood, moved to the edge of the clearing and looked back. Garrett understood. She knew where to go. He pulled Walter to his feet one more time. Come on, not much farther. It was a lie. He had no idea how far, but lies were all he had left to keep Walter moving. They followed Mercy. She led them across the frozen creek and up the far slope. The trees thinned here, opening up into scrub brush and scattered pines. The wind was worse without the forest to block it, cutting across the open ground like a living thing. Garrett's hands were numb. His face felt like carved stone. His breath came in short bursts, each one burning his lungs. Walter was barely conscious now, leaning most of his weight on Garrett. The puppies struggled through snow that was nearly as deep as they were tall. Then Garrett saw it. A structure, dark against the lighter darkness of the sky. A fire watchtower, old, probably abandoned, but standing. He half-carried Walter the last 100 yards. The tower loomed above them, a skeletal framework of wood and metal, rising 40 feet into the air. A small cabin sat at the top, accessible by a ladder built into the support beams. Garrett looked up. The ladder. No way Walter could climb it, but at the base of the tower was a storage shed, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Garrett kicked it open. Inside was darkness and the smell of old wood and animal droppings. But it was shelter, out of the wind. He pulled Walter inside and lowered him to the floor. Mercy and the puppies followed. Garrett pulled the door shut. It didn't latch, but it blocked most of the wind. There was no light. He used his phone, the screen casting a pale glow. The shed was mostly empty, a few old tools, some rotted rope, and in the corner a stack of firewood that looked like it had been there for years. Garrett grabbed the driest pieces and arranged them in the center of the shed. He dug in his pockets. No matches, no lighter. He was about to give up when Mercy moved. She nosed at Walter's coat pocket, then looked at Garrett. He checked the pocket. Inside was a cheap plastic lighter. Garrett almost laughed. Good girl. He got the fire started. It took 3 tries, his numb fingers fumbling with the lighter. But then the kindling caught, and flames spread through the dry wood. Smoke filled the shed, making them cough, but warmth began to seep into the space. Garrett moved Walter closer to the fire. The old man's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. This was bad. This was very bad. Garrett knew the signs. He'd seen them in Kandahar and Helmand, in a dozen firefights where men went down and the medevac was 30 minutes out, and 30 minutes might as well be forever. Rapid pulse, weak pulse, cold extremities, altered mental state. These were the markers of shock, of a body shutting down. He needed to warm Walter. Fast, but not too fast. Rapid rewarming could cause cardiac arrest. Garrett positioned Walter on his side, close enough to the fire for warmth, but not so close he'd burn. He removed Walter's wet outer layers, leaving the thermal underneath. He took off his own thermal shirt and wrapped it around Walter's chest. Then he lay down behind the old man, using his own body heat to warm him from behind. Mercy understood without being told. She lay in front of Walter, her body creating a cocoon of warmth. The puppies pressed against Walter's legs. They stayed like that for 20 minutes. The fire burned. The shed filled with warmth. Slowly, degree by degree, Walter's color improved. His breathing deepened. His pulse steadied. Garrett's own body was screaming at him. His chest hurt. His ribs ached from old injuries that never quite healed right. His hands shook from cold and adrenaline crash. But Walter was alive. For now. Outside, the wind howled, snow battered against the shed walls. And somewhere in the darkness, men with guns were still looking for them. Garrett's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. The screen showed 12% battery. 1 bar of signal. A text message. From Kira. Where are you? He looked at the phone for a long moment. Then he typed with frozen fingers. Firewatch Tower, North Ridge, under attack, need help. He hit send. The message went through, then the signal dropped. Garrett let his eyes fall shut. He could hear Walter's breathing steady now. He could feel Mercy's warmth on the other side of the old man. The puppies were asleep, tiny bundles of heat. The fire crackled. The wind screamed outside. Garrett let himself drift, not sleeping, but not quite awake either. A state he'd learned overseas. Combat rest. Aware enough to react, but conserved enough to function. His mind drifted to the men outside. To Victor Drummond. To the system that allowed men like Drummond to exist. He thought about the recording. Evan Cross's voice. The fear in it. He thought about the 9 properties, $6 million stolen from people who had already given everything. He thought about Mercy, about how she'd known to lead them here, about how she'd saved him from his own nightmares just hours ago. And he thought about choices, about the choice he'd made when he stopped in that town square, about the choice he was making now to stay in this shed with a dying old man and 3 dogs while armed men hunted them through a Montana blizzard. He'd spent 3 years trying to disappear, trying to find peace in silence and distance, trying to forget what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. One night, he'd promised Walter one night. That promise was broken now, shattered like the window in his cabin. But something else had taken its place, something he couldn't quite name yet. Purpose maybe, or responsibility, or just the simple, stubborn refusal to let the bad guys win. The fire burned lower. Garrett added more wood. Walter coughed but didn't wake. Mercy opened her eyes, checked the room, then closed them again. Time passed. An hour, maybe more. It was hard to tell. Then Garrett heard it, the sound that separated itself from the wind, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades. He sat up fast, moving to the door. He eased it open a crack. The sky was still dark, but to the east there was the faintest hint of gray. Dawn was coming, and in the skylights, red and white cutting through the snow, a helicopter. Garrett's hand went to his rifle. He didn't know if it was rescue or threat. Not yet. The helicopter came closer, its searchlight sweeping the ground below. It circled once, twice. Then it hovered directly above the tower. Mercy stood. She moved to the door and looked out. Her ears came forward. Not in alarm, in recognition. Garrett watched her. She'd been around helicopters before. She knew the difference between models, between military and civilian, between threat and rescue. She sat down, calm, waiting. The helicopter began to descend. It couldn't land, not with the trees too close, but it held position 30 feet up. A rope dropped from the side door. 2 figures fast roped down. They hit the ground and moved toward the shed, weapons raised but pointed down. The lead figure pulled up a face mask, dark hair, brown eyes, a woman's face. Garrett Hale. He stepped out of the shed. Yeah, she lowered her weapon. Agent Rebecca Stanton, FBI. She looked past him. Is Walter Briggs with you? He's inside. He needs medical attention, pneumonia and exposure. Rebecca spoke into her radio. We've got them. I need medical evac, now. She moved to the shed, knelt beside Walter, checked his pulse, his breathing. She pulled a thermal blanket from her pack and wrapped it around him. He's stable for now. Helicopter's got a medic. She looked at Garrett. You're hypothermic too. You know that, right? I'll live. You will, because I need you to testify. She stood and faced him. Deputy Thornton sent me your location. She also sent me everything on that SD card. We've got Victor Drummond in federal custody. We arrested him 2 hours ago. Garrett stared at her. 2 hours ago. We've been building a case on him for 6 months. The evidence you sent was the last piece we needed. She paused. We also arrested Detective Morgan. He was coordinating with Drummond's men, the ones who attacked your cabin. Deputy Foster. Him too. He's at Kalispell Regional with a shoulder wound. He's talking. Gave up 5 other officers across 2 counties. Garrett's legs felt weak suddenly. He leaned against the shed wall. It's over. The immediate threat, the case no. We're going to need you, both of you. This is bigger than one man. The helicopter descended as low as it could. A rescue basket lowered on a cable. Rebecca and the other FBI agent lifted Walter into it. The basket rose, came back down empty. You next, Rebecca said. Garrett turned to Mercy, to the puppies, the dogs. They come too. Don't worry, FBI helicopters have carried stranger things than German shepherds. They loaded Mercy first. She climbed into the basket without hesitation. The puppies went next, huddled together in an equipment bag with air holes. Then Garrett. As the basket rose, he looked down at the forest, at the shed that had saved their lives, at the landscape that had tried to kill them. The sun was coming up now, turning the eastern sky pink and gold. The snow had stopped. The world looked clean and new, and utterly indifferent to everything that had happened in the last 8 hours. The helicopter interior was warm. A medic immediately went to work on Walter, checking vitals, starting an IV. Another medic examined Mercy's leg wound. Garrett watched as they cleaned and bandaged it with professional efficiency. Scout whimpered. Garrett reached down and picked her up. She was trembling. He held her against his chest, sharing warmth. Rebecca sat across from him, pulling off her tactical gloves. You did good. Both of you. Garrett had no words. He was too tired for them. The helicopter banked and headed south toward Kalispell. The sun climbed higher, bright and cold. Below, the forest stretched out in an endless expanse of white. Garrett leaned back against the bulkhead. He could still feel the weight of Mercy's head on his chest from the night before. Could still hear Walter's voice. Just one night, warm, safe. One night had become the longest night of his life. And it wasn't over yet. At the hospital, they were separated. Walter went to intensive care. Garrett went to a treatment room where they wrapped him in heated blankets and pushed warm fluids. His core temperature was 94 degrees. 2 more degrees and he would have been critical. Mercy and the puppies went with a veterinary team. The vet on call was Dr. Evelyn Price. She'd served with Garrett in Afghanistan 5 years ago. She didn't say much when she saw him, just nodded once and took the dogs. Kira arrived an hour later. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. She sat down in the chair next to Garrett's bed. You're an idiot, she said. Yeah, you could have died, but we didn't. She was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out a folder. Agent Stanton wanted you to see this. Garrett opened it. Inside were documents, financial records, property deeds, arrest warrants. Victor Drummond, Kira said, charged with 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of elder abuse, 9 counts of forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of making terroristic threats. Evan Cross. They're reopening his death investigation. They found elevated potassium levels in stored tissue samples. Potassium chloride. It causes cardiac arrest that looks natural. Can't prove it yet, but they're working on it. Garrett turned the pages. How many people did he hurt? 17 that we know of. Maybe more. The FBI's going through his files now. She leaned forward. You stopped him, Garrett. You and Walter. You stopped him. Agent Stanton stopped him. Agent Stanton had a case. You gave her the proof. Kira stood. Get some rest. We'll need your statement tomorrow. She left. The room fell quiet. Garrett stared at the ceiling. The heated blankets made his skin itch. The IV in his arm was uncomfortable. But he was alive. Walter was alive. Mercy and the puppies were alive. That was something. He drifted off, eventually his sleep dreamless for the first time in months. When he woke, it was dark outside. He'd slept for 12 hours. A nurse came in and checked his vitals, declared him improved, and left. Dr. Evelyn Price came in next. She looked like she always did, calm and competent, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a braid. The dogs are fine, she said without preamble. Mercy's leg will heal clean, no infection. The puppies are healthy, just a little underweight. I'm keeping them overnight for observation, but you can take them home tomorrow. Home, Garrett said. The word felt strange. He didn't have a home anymore. Not after tonight. Evelyn seemed to read his mind. The FBI secured your cabin. It's a crime scene now, but they'll release it in a few days. Structural damage is minimal. Mostly broken windows and bullet holes. Garrett nodded. Evelyn hesitated. I heard what you did. Running into the forest with an old man and 3 dogs. That was stupid, Garrett. I know. It was also brave. She put a hand on his shoulder. Mercy's a good dog. She knows what she's doing. Trust her. I do. Then trust yourself too. She left. Garrett was alone again. He looked at his hands. They were wrapped in gauze where frostbite had started to set in. He'd heal. He always healed. But something had changed, something fundamental. He couldn't go back to the way things were. Sitting alone in his cabin, avoiding the world, waiting for the nightmares to fade. They never faded. He knew that now. But maybe they didn't have to control him either. Maybe purpose was the antidote to trauma. Maybe fighting for something real was better than fighting the ghosts in his own head. He thought about Walter, about how the old man had lost everything and kept going, about how he'd chosen to save 3 dogs instead of saving himself. He thought about Mercy, about how she'd known what he needed before he did, about how she'd led them through the forest to safety. He thought about the SD card hidden in her collar, about Evan Cross's final act of defiance, about how sometimes the smallest things carried the most weight. The door opened. Walter shuffled in wearing a hospital gown and dragging an IV pole. He looked frail but alive. "They said I should stay in bed," Walter said, "but I wanted to see you." Garrett sat up. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." Walter lowered himself into the chair. "They told me what happened, what you did, carrying me through the forest, keeping me alive. Mercy did most of the work." "No, you did." Walter's eyes were wet. "You didn't have to. You could have left me, saved yourself." "That's not how I was trained." "It's not about training. It's about character." Walter reached out and gripped Garrett's hand. His grip was weak but steady. "Thank you." Garrett didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. They sat in silence for a while. Outside the hospital hummed with its constant low noise. Somewhere a machine beeped. Somewhere a door closed. Finally, Walter spoke. "What happens now? You get your house back. The FBI's voiding all the fraudulent transfers. You'll have to go through some legal process, but it's yours." "And you?" Garrett studied his hands. "I don't know. Mercy needs someone, so do the puppies. I'm not exactly stable." "Who is?" Walter smiled. It was the first time Garrett had seen him smile. Evan used to say the best handlers were the ones who needed the dogs as much as the dogs needed them. He said it made them equal. Partners. Garrett thought about that, about partnership, about not being alone. "I'll think about it," he said. Walter stood slowly. "That's all I ask." He headed for the door, then paused. "One night, that's what you promised. But you gave me more than that. You gave me hope." He left. Garrett lay back down. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 3 years he thought about tomorrow, not as something to survive, but as something to build. Outside, the Montana night stretched on, cold and clear and full of stars. The kind of night that made you believe in second chances, if you were brave enough to take them. The courtroom was smaller than Garrett expected. Not the grand halls of justice he'd seen in movies, but a functional municipal space with fluorescent lighting and worn carpet. The kind of room where lives change quietly without drama or fanfare. He sat in the back row, hands folded in his lap, watching. Walter sat at the front table with a court-appointed attorney, his shoulders straight despite the exhaustion that still lined his face. 6 weeks had passed since the night in the forest. 6 weeks of healing physical therapy and waiting. Walter's lungs had finally cleared. Garrett's frostbite scars were fading. Mercy walked without a limp. Mercy lay at Garrett's feet, her service dog vest, clean and official. The puppies were at Dr. Price's clinic, too young for the formality of court. Garrett's hands rested on Mercy's head, fingers buried in her thick fur. The rhythm of her breathing kept him grounded. Agent Rebecca Stanton sat 2 rows ahead, her FBI credentials clipped to her belt. Deputy Kira Thornton was beside her, in full uniform, hair pulled back tight. They'd both testified already. Now it was Walter's turn. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Catherine Reeves. She had steel gray hair, cut short, and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd listened to 3 hours of testimony without interruption, her face giving nothing away. Now she looked at Walter. "Mr. Briggs, would you approach the bench, please?" Walter stood slowly. His attorney helped him to his feet. The pneumonia had left him weaker than before, his breathing still labored. But he walked forward without assistance, one step at a time. The judge studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Briggs, I've reviewed the evidence presented by the FBI. Forged signatures, fraudulent notary stamps, coerced transfers. The pattern is clear and disturbing." Walter nodded but said nothing. "I've also reviewed the recordings found on the SD card belonging to Evan Cross. The threats made by Victor Drummond are explicit and prosecutable." She removed her glasses. "Mr. Briggs, in light of this evidence, I'm issuing an emergency order to void the property transfer dated March 15, 2020. Your home at 47 Lakeview Road is hereby restored to your sole ownership." Walter's knees buckled. His attorney caught him. For a moment, the only sound was Walter's breathing, harsh and wet, as if he'd been holding it for 6 weeks and could finally let it go. The judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm ordering the immediate release of all assets seized by Mr. Drummond in relation to this property. Additionally, Victor Drummond's personal assets are to be frozen pending federal criminal proceedings and civil restitution." She looked directly at Walter. "Mr. Briggs, this court recognizes that no legal remedy can restore what was taken from you. Your home, yes, but not the months you spent without shelter, not the dignity stripped away, Justice is often late and always incomplete, but it is here now. Walter made a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. He covered his face with his hands. The judge's voice softened. You're a veteran of a different kind of war, Mr. Briggs. You served men and women who came home broken, and you helped them heal. That service matters. This court sees you. She brought down the gavel. Not loud, just final. Court is adjourned. Garrett stood, and as Walter turned, the old man's face was wet with tears, but he was smiling. Actually smiling. Garrett met him halfway down the aisle. You heard, Walter asked. I heard. I'm going home. Garrett gripped his shoulder. You're going home. Outside the courthouse, the February sun was bright and cold. The snow had melted in patches, revealing dead grass underneath. Spring was still weeks away, but the light had changed. Winter was loosening its grip. Agent Stanton came down the steps behind them, Kira at her side. Mr. Briggs, congratulations. You should have full access to your property within 72 hours. Walter wiped his eyes. What about Victor federal court? His trial starts in 6 weeks. The DA has him on 18 federal counts. He's looking at 25 years minimum. Agent Stanton pulled out a folder. But there's more. She opened it. Inside were photographs. 17 faces. Men and women ranging from 50 to 80 years old. Some Garrett recognized from the documents. Others were new. These are the other victims we've identified, Agent Stanton said. All connected to warriors and paws. All targeted the same way. With your testimony and the evidence from Evan Cross, we're pursuing restitution for all of them. Walter looked at the faces. His hand trembled as he touched one photograph. Tom Reeves, the Marine who'd lost his cabin. They'll get their homes back, Walter asked. Most of them. Some properties were already resold to third parties, which complicates things legally. But we're working on financial compensation. Agent Stanton closed the folder. You did this, Mr. Briggs. You and Mr. Hale. You exposed a system that's been operating for 6 years. Evan did it, Walter said quietly. He knew. He tried to stop it. It got him killed. Agent Stanton's expression darkened. We're working on that too. Toxicology results will take another month, but the medical examiner is treating it as a probable homicide. If we can prove Victor administered the potassium chloride, we'll add murder to his charges. Kira shifted her weight. What about the cops, Foster and the others? 6 officers arrested, 3 more under investigation. Detective Morgan's already pleaded guilty in exchange for testimony against Drummond. He's getting 7 years federal. Not enough, Kira said. No, but it's something. Agent Stanton's attention shifted to Garrett. We're going to need you to testify, both at Drummond's trial and in the civil proceedings. Garrett nodded. I'll be there. Good, I'll be in touch. Agent Stanton shook their hands and walked to her car, a black Suburban parked at the curb. Kira lingered. She looked at Walter, then at Garrett. There's something else you should know. The FBI's investigation uncovered more than just Drummond's operation. They found connections to similar schemes in Wyoming and Idaho. Small scale, but same pattern. Elder fraud targeting veterans. How many? Garrett asked. They're still counting, but it's a lot. She paused. This is bigger than one man. It's systemic. Walter closed his eyes. All those people. Yeah, Kira touched his arm, but you started the process of shutting it down. That counts for something. She left them standing on the courthouse steps. The sun climbed higher. Traffic moved past. The world continued as if nothing had changed, but for Walter Briggs, everything had. Garrett drove Walter back to the cabin. Not Walter's cabin, not yet, but Garrett's place, which had become theirs over the past 6 weeks. The FBI had finished processing it as a crime scene. The windows were repaired. The bullet holes were patched. It looked almost normal. Inside, Dr. Evelyn Price was waiting with the puppies. They'd grown in 6 weeks, their legs longer, their coordination better. Ranger bounded across the room and crashed into Garrett's legs. Scout followed more cautiously, her amber eyes serious. Mercy greeted them with a mother's patience, checking them over, satisfied they were whole. Evelyn stood from the couch. I've been keeping them socialized. They're doing well. Ranger's bold to the point of recklessness. Scout's cautious but confident. Both good traits for service dogs, just different applications. You think they can be trained? Garrett asked. I think they already are being trained. By Mercy. She's teaching them better than any formal program could. Evelyn pulled on her coat. I've got to get back to the clinic. But Garrett, we should talk soon. About the future. What about it? Warriors and Paws is gone. But the need isn't. Evelyn leaned against the counter the same way she used to lean against Humvees in Kandahar. when she was patching up military working dogs. Her eyes held the same practical focus they'd had back then. There are 43 veterans in Flathead County alone with documented PTSD. Most can't afford service dogs. Most don't even know they're an option. She zipped her coat. Just something to think about. She left. Garrett stood in the middle of the room surrounded by dogs and possibility. Walter sat on the couch looking more relaxed than Garrett had ever seen him. She's right, Walter said. About what? About the need. Evan built something that mattered. When he died, it fell apart, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Garrett stayed silent. He moved to the kitchen and started making coffee. The routine steadied him. Measure the grounds, pour the water, wait for the machine to hiss and bubble. He thought about Evelyn's words, about need, about 43 veterans who couldn't sleep at night, or couldn't leave their houses, or couldn't stop seeing things that weren't there anymore. He thought about Mercy's weight on his chest, about how she'd known what he needed before he did. He poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them to the living room, handed one to Walter. I'm not a dog trainer, Garrett said. Neither was I. Evan trained me, just like Mercy trained you. I don't have money to start a program. Walter smiled. Funny thing about that, Drummond's frozen assets. A good portion of them came from stealing Warriors and Paws funds. Federal restitution law says those assets get returned to the victims. And technically, Warriors and Paws was a victim too. Garrett sat down. You're saying, I'm saying there might be money. If someone wanted to restart the program, under a new name, with new leadership. Walter sipped his coffee. I'm too old to run it, but I could help, advisory role, and I know 12 other volunteers from the old program who'd come back if someone asked. Garrett's gaze found Mercy. She looked back patient and knowing. I wouldn't know where to start, Garrett said. Start with one dog, one veteran, see if it works, then do it again. Walter set down his cup. That's what Evan did. Started small, grew steady, changed lives one at a time. The puppies wrestled on the floor, all teeth and paws and enthusiasm. Scout pinned Ranger, then immediately let him up, teaching him the rules, showing him boundaries. Garrett's coffee went cold in his hands. He stared out the window at Lake North Pine, still frozen, but with dark patches where the ice was beginning to thin. I'll think about it, he said. 6 weeks passed, winter turned to early spring, the kind that came with mud and rain and the slow revelation of a world that had been buried. Walter's house was cleared for occupancy. The county expedited the paperwork, embarrassed by what had happened under their watch. Garrett helped Walter move back in. The house was empty of furniture, most of it sold or stolen while Walter was gone. But the bones were good, solid foundation, good roof, and it sat right on the lake with a view that stretched for miles. They spent a week cleaning, painting, fixing. Tom Reeves came by with his truck and donated a couch and table. Margaret Porter, another victim, brought dishes and bedding. Other people from town showed up with tools and time, people who'd heard the story and wanted to help. By the end of March, Walter's house looked lived in again, and something else was growing there too. A sign appeared on the fence by the road. Hand-painted simple letters. North Light Haven. Walter had explained the name one evening while they painted the front room. Evan used to say that up here in Montana, the darkest nights are when you need light most. Not big dramatic light, just enough to see the next step. North Light, steady, reliable, there when you need it. The program started small. One veteran, a man named Colin Greer, 46 Army Infantry, 3 tours Iraq. He'd been referred by the VA. Severe PTSD, agoraphobia, suicidal ideation. He showed up on a Tuesday, shoulders hunched, eyes down. Mercy assessed him in 5 minutes. Then she went to him, sat beside his chair, and waited. Colin's hand shook as he reached out to touch her head. He didn't speak. He just sat there, one hand on Mercy's fur, breathing. After an hour, he stood to leave. His attention turned to Garrett. Can I come back? Every day if you want. Colin came back. Then he came back again. By the 2nd week, he was smiling. By the 4th week, he brought his wife. By the 8th week, he was volunteering, helping build the kennels behind Walter's house. Word spread. The VA put North Light Haven on their referral list. Dr. Price became the program's veterinary advisor. Kira stopped by on weekends off duty bringing supplies. Agent Rebecca Stanton visited in April, brought 2 more veterans and a donation check from the FBI Victim Assistance Fund. $15,000. This is remarkable, Agent Stanton said, watching Colin work with a ranger teaching the young dog basic commands. You've built something real here. Walter built it, Garrett said. I'm just helping. No, you're leading. She watched Mercy move between three different veterans, assessing providing presence where it was needed most. The Bureau's interested in partnering. Not officially, but we have resources. Training funds, access to specialized equipment. Why? Because this works. Because pills and therapy help, but sometimes what people need is something simpler. Something that doesn't judge. Something that stays. Agent Stanton pulled out a business card. Call me when you're ready to expand. The trial happened in May. Garrett and Walter both testified. The courtroom was packed, filled with victims and their families, with reporters, with people who'd followed the story. Victor Drummond sat at the defense table, his expensive suit perfect, his expression calm. At 47, he didn't look like a man facing 25 years in prison. He looked like a successful businessman, confident and composed. Garrett took the stand and told the truth. All of it. The night in the square, the forged documents, the attack on the cabin, the night in the forest. Victor's lawyer tried to shake him. Mr. Hale, isn't it true you were dishonorably discharged from the Navy? No, but you left under medical circumstances. I was injured in combat. I took medical retirement. That's not the same thing. You suffer from PTSD, correct? Yes. Severe enough to require medication. I manage it. With medication, with purpose. The lawyer paused. Purpose. Yes, I found something worth owning, something that mattered. The medication didn't work. Purpose did. The lawyer had no response to that. Walter's testimony was shorter but more powerful. He spoke about Evan Cross, about warriors and paws, about what it meant to lose everything and then be told you'd signed away your own home. I trusted him. Walter said, his gaze steady on Victor. You came to my hospital room when I was sick. You brought me soup. You called me friend. And then you stole my life. Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker crossed his gaze. Brief, almost imperceptible. Guilt, Garrett wondered, or just irritation at being caught. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Catherine Reeves presided. She'd reviewed the evidence, the victim's statements, the scope of the crime. Mr. Drummond, she said, you betrayed the trust of men and women who had already sacrificed for this country. You exploited their vulnerability for personal gain. You destroyed lives with paperwork and lies. And when faced with exposure, you resorted to violence. Victor stood, still calm, still composed. This court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all 17 victims, totaling $4.6 million. Your assets are forfeit. Your law license is permanently revoked. She leaned forward. You will spend the next 2 decades remembering the homes you stole. And perhaps if you're capable of it, you'll find something resembling remorse. Victor was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, Walter stood in the spring sunlight, breathing deep. It's over. Part of it, Garrett said. The rest is just beginning. Summer came to Montana with wildflowers and long evenings. North Light Haven grew. 2 more veterans joined the program, then 3 more, then 5. They built 4 kennels, then 6. Dr. Price helped them establish a breeding program, carefully selecting German shepherds with the right temperament. Mercy became the foundation female her bloodline carrying forward. In June, Scout had her first litter. 5 puppies, all healthy, all showing early signs of Mercy's calm intelligence. Ranger was matched with a Navy corpsman who'd lost both legs in an IED blast. The bond was immediate and transformative. Kira left the sheriff's department in July. She'd been offered a position with the FBI's Elder Crimes Unit working with Agent Stanton. On her last day, she stopped by North Light Haven. I'm going to miss this place, she said, watching the veterans work with their dogs. You can visit, Garrett said. I will, but it won't be the same. She looked at him. You did something important here, Garrett. You and Walter. You turned tragedy into healing. That's rare. It's what Evan wanted. No, it's what you chose. She smiled. There's a difference. She left for Quantico the next day. In August, Emily Cross visited. Evan's niece, 26, now working as a social worker in Missoula. She brought flowers and laid them at a memorial stone Walter had placed near the lake. Evan Cross, it read, he saw the wounded and gave them purpose. Emily stood there for a long time. Then she turned to Walter. Thank you for remembering him. I couldn't forget him if I tried. He saved me before I even knew I needed saving. He was good at that. Emily wiped her eyes. He talked about you. In the weeks before he died, he was worried, said Victor was circling, said he had to protect the people who trusted him. He did, Walter said. Even after he was gone, he protected us. That SD card saved everything. Emily nodded. He believed in preparation, in having insurance. She looked at Mercy, who sat nearby with Scout and 3 of Scout's puppies. He'd be glad to see this, to know it didn't die with him. It almost did, Garrett said, but someone made sure it couldn't. They stood together as the sun set over Lake North Pine, painting the water gold and orange. The dogs played in the grass. The veterans laughed at something Colin had said. The air smelled like pine and fresh water and possibility. September brought the first signs of fall. The program had grown to 12 veterans, 8 dogs, and a waiting list of 43 more names. The VA formally recognized North Lighthaven as an approved service dog provider. The state of Montana issued them a nonprofit certification. Garrett hired help, 2 trainers, both veterans themselves, a part-time administrator to handle paperwork, a groundskeeper to maintain the expanding property. Walter moved slower now, his health declining despite the treatments. But he came every day, sitting in a chair by the kennels, watching the dogs work, offering advice when asked. "You've done well," he told Garrett one afternoon. "Better than Evan, better than I ever could have. I had good teachers. You had good instincts." Walter coughed, the sound wet and deep. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't let this become just a business. Keep it personal. Every veteran, every dog, they're not numbers, they're lives." "I promise." Walter nodded. "Good. That's all I needed to hear." He passed away in October, peacefully in his own bed, in his own house. His last view was of the lake he loved, with Mercy lying beside him. The funeral was held at the original Warriors and Paws facility, now restored and renamed the Evan Cross Memorial Training Center. 200 people attended. Veterans, volunteers, FBI agents, townspeople who'd been touched by Walter's quiet strength. Garrett gave the eulogy. He spoke about $5, about a town square in winter, about how one man's refusal to give up had changed everything. Walter Briggs didn't ask for recognition, Garrett said. He didn't want glory, he just wanted dignity. For himself and for 3 dogs he couldn't bear to abandon. That choice, that small act of love, exposed a criminal network and saved 17 families. But more than that, it reminded us what we're supposed to be, protectors, not of things or property or money, of each other. They buried Walter next to Evan, overlooking the lake. The headstone was simple. Walter Briggs. He chose compassion over comfort. Mercy stood beside the grave, silent and still. She understood loss. She'd known it before, but she also understood continuation. The work wasn't done. Winter returned, the cycle completed. But this winter was different from the last. North Lighthaven didn't close for the season, didn't slow down. 20 veterans were enrolled now, 15 dogs in training, 7 matches completed, 3 more in progress. Garrett stood at the window of Walter's house, now the administrative center of the program, and looked out at the frozen lake. 1 year ago, he'd been alone, isolated, surviving but not living. Now there were lights in the kennels, voices in the yard, dog barking with purpose and joy. Mercy came to stand beside him. She was 7 now, graying slightly around the muzzle, but still strong, still present, still doing what she was born to do. "We made it," Garrett said quietly. Mercy leaned against his leg. Agreement, partnership, understanding. Outside, Ranger worked with his veteran, practicing deep pressure therapy. Scout supervised 3 of her puppies, teaching them patience and timing. Colin Greer, the program's first success story, now trained as an assistant handler, passed on what he'd learned. The phone rang. Garrett answered. It was a VA counselor from Wyoming. They had 3 veterans who needed help. "Could North Lighthaven take them?" "Yes," Garrett said. "We can take them." He hung up, looked at Mercy. 3 more. She wagged her tail once. Ready, always ready. That evening, Garrett sat down at the desk and opened his laptop. He'd been avoiding this for months, but Walter's voice echoed in his head. "Don't let this become just a business." He opened a document and started typing. Not a report, not a grant application, a story. It began with $5 and a cardboard sign, with an old man and a mother dog and 2 puppies, with cold that cut through everything and warmth that saved everyone. He wrote through the night, every detail, every moment, the attack, the forest, the trial, the victory, the loss, the rebuilding. He wrote until the sun came up, painting the frozen lake gold. When he finished, he saved the document, the Mercy Protocol, a true story of how one act of compassion can dismantle systems of cruelty, of how purpose is found in the least expected places, of how healing isn't a destination, but a practice repeated daily with patience and love. He would publish it, share it, let other towns, other programs, other broken people know that there was a path forward. But not yet. First, there were 3 veterans arriving from Wyoming. There were dogs to train. There were lives to change. Garrett closed the laptop and stood. Mercy waited by the door, patient as always. Come on, girl. We've got work to do. They stepped out into the Montana morning. The air was cold, but not cruel. The sun was bright. The lake stretched out before them, frozen solid, waiting for spring. And in the kennels, in the training yards, in the hearts of men and women who thought they were beyond saving, something remarkable was growing. Hope, purpose, second chances. All because one man stopped his truck on a winter evening and saw what others had walked past. Because he chose to stay when he could have left. Because he understood that the greatest acts of heroism aren't found on battlefields. They're found in the daily choice to show up, to help, to refuse to let the world's cruelty have the final word. Garrett walked toward the kennels. Behind him, the house that had been Walter's and was now everyone's. Ahead of him, the work that never ended but always mattered. Mercy trotted beside him, faithful and steady. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear it. The sound of lives being rebuilt. One dog, one veteran, one day at a time. North Light Haven. Where the darkest nights meet the steadiest light. Where broken things learn to be whole again. Where a German shepherd named Mercy teaches humans what they'd forgotten. That sometimes $5 is enough to change the world. The morning routine never changed. Garrett woke before dawn, made coffee, and walked to the kennels. Mercy always met him halfway, her amber eyes catching the first light. Today, as he crossed the yard, he found something new. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in white. And there at the gate, someone had left a cardboard sign. The letters were uneven, written by a child's hand maybe, or someone who'd forgotten how to hope. Free dog needs home. Please help. Garrett picked up the sign. His gaze found Mercy. She was already moving toward the road, toward wherever that person was walking away, shoulders hunched against the cold. He followed her. Behind them, the lights of North Light Haven glowed warm against the Montana dawn. Inside, veterans were waking. Dogs were stirring. Another day of healing was beginning. But out here at the edge of the property where the light didn't quite reach, yet there was work to be done. There was always work to be done. Garrett tucked the sign under his arm and walked faster. Mercy glanced back once, making sure he was following. He was. He always would be.